Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's morning briefing. After over 460 rockets fell from Gaza into southern Israel in just 25 hours, Israeli officials and Gaza terror groups have come to a shaky yet holding ceasefire. There have not been any reports of rocket fire from Gaza since Tuesday evening, allowing some semblance of normalcy to resume in the south. Egyptian officials facilitated the hours-long negotiations between Israel and Hamas Tuesday afternoon. IDF forces did apprehend a Gazan Palestinian man this morning, however, acting on his own along the northern Gaza border fence. The suspect reportedly threw a few grenades at the security barrier, which failed to detonate. Israeli soldiers shot and wounded the suspect before arresting him, at which point they also found a pair of bolt cutters and a knife on his person. It's for reasons like this, as well as the possibility that hostilities might resume at any moment, that Israeli forces have remained at their posts along the Strip. And in fact, both Israeli and Palestinian military officials have stated their determination to respond diligently to any threat. Restrictions on southern Israeli residents were, however, lifted last night as a tentative calm begins to creep back in. Hostilities began Sunday evening when an Israeli unit was caught working undercover in the southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis. Israeli officials say it was an intelligence gathering mission gone awry, while Hamas says the unit was there to assassinate one of their members. 7 to 10 Palestinians, mostly militants, were killed in the resulting exchange of fire, as well as Israeli Lieutenant Colonel Mem, as he's been addressed in the press. Another Israeli soldier was injured before their team was extracted, but this ultimately led to the back and forth over the last few days. One civilian in Israel was killed and at least 50 others were injured in the Hamas rocket and mortar attacks. Israel in turn reportedly struck at least 150 targets within the Strip.
So far we have struck more than 150 military targets, all of them military targets belonging to either the Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, again signifying the difference here between what the terrorists do and what we do. They target civilians and we target terrorist activities.
Meanwhile, as Israel and Gaza mull over the previous 48 hours, the United Nations Security Council met behind closed doors to discuss the conflict for themselves. The council meeting was initiated at the request of Kuwait, Bolivia, and the Palestinian Authority's UN envoy, and the PA's permanent UN observer Riyad Mansour condemned, quote, Israel's aggression, end quote, for starting the violence. Kuwait, which represents many Arab countries, chimed in as well, as monitoring on social media also reflected the currently heightened hostility against Israel in the Arab world. Israeli United Nations Ambassador Dani Danon, on the other hand, addressed the UN ahead of the Security Council meeting to point out that first, Israel did not start the aggressions, and second, regardless of what started it, Hamas commits war crimes every time it targets civilian populations.
Every time Hamas fires a rocket, children at school, adults at work, families across Israel hear this. We take actions to protect our people. And when you know that someone is digging a tunnel, or someone is planning an attack, or a kidnap attack, you take protective actions. We will continue to take those actions, no matter where it will take place, in order to prevent future assaults on our people.
France and the United States also came out against Hamas's actions in the strongest possible terms, saying it's unacceptable under any circumstances to intentionally terrorize non-combative communities.
France condemns in the strongest terms the rocket launches from Hamas against civilian targets on the Israeli territory. The fear in which the populations of southern Israel live must stop. That's a very important thing. At the same time, the disproportionate violence against Palestinians must also stop. It is unjustifiable, regardless to our attachment to the security of Israel. And you know that France will never compromise with the security of Israel. Finally, we call on all parties to avoid an escalation. The civilian populations would be the first victims of a new cycle of deadly violence. So there is an emergency to break this negative cycle.
Returning now to the Israeli south, 41-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Mem was laid to rest yesterday, leaving behind a wife and 2 children, as rockets continued to pummel the south ahead of the tentatively reached ceasefire. But Lieutenant Colonel Mem wasn't the only victim of Hamas's indiscriminate attacks. A Palestinian husband and father of 6 from Khalkhul, just north of Hebron in the West Bank, was killed in Ashkelon when a Gaza-launched rocket landed on an apartment building he was in. He was identified later as 48-year-old building contractor Mahmoud Abu Azba. 8 others were injured in the shelling as well, 2 critically. At least 50 other civilians in Israel were wounded and/or hospitalized too, though, by the 2 days of Hamas rockets and mortar fire. That's why, despite the shaky ceasefire appearing to hold, the calm has not been welcomed by everyone. Many Israelis, especially residents of the southern Gaza border communities, are today demanding that the government do more to end the threat from Hamas. Right after information of a ceasefire was released, protesters in the south headed to the streets to burn tires and block roads to express their frustration with the government. Demonstrators chanted that they don't want to live a life under terror anymore. They intend to protest and block streets in Tel Aviv today as well. Rather than wait through a ceasefire they have no hope in, southern Israelis like Reut Basis from Sderot say, quote, "It's better to suffer in the safe rooms and once and for all put an end to all of this," end quote. Because she knows that, quote, "A month from now it will be the same thing again. Another few days and again there will be missiles and nothing will have changed. It's unreasonable that this is how our lives look," end quote. Miri, another resident from Sderot, similarly stated that she thinks Israel is shooting itself in the foot, explaining that, quote, "We have been at war for 17 years. Our children are soldiers, they have PTSD. We are no longer willing to let them fool us. We do not believe neither in the government nor its leader."
כולם היו רוצים הפסקת אש, אבל רוצים להחזיר את כוח ההרתעה לצה"ל. נמאס לנו שכל חודש יש לנו פה עוד טרור ועוד קסאמים ועוד הפוגה. כנראה שהממשלה שלנו איבדה את כוח ההרתעה. כנראה שהם לא מבינים מה קורה.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.